Hello, universe. Welcome to my world. I first heard Angelina Jordan in August of 2020, and I've had a very eventful 5 years as a direct result of my Angelina Jordan experience. And I've learned many things, and one of the biggest things I've learned is about jazz. When I was a child, I didn't realize it at the time, but I had a very one-dimensional view of jazz. I thought jazz was something like Dave Brubeck with Take 5. And just last week, for the first time, I heard a Billie Holiday song I'd never heard before, called Fine and Mellow. And this was the moment I really understood how Angelina has been influenced by Billie Holiday. When you listen to this segment, every single word that Billie Holiday comes to, she has different options. She can go off in different directions. She can hit a different note, and she has different options of how she expresses it. And this is what Angelina does. And you can hear this with Billie Holiday's performance.
Treat me right, baby, and I'll stay home every day. Just treat me right, baby, and I'll stay home night and day. But you're so mean to me, baby. I know you're gonna drive me away. Love is just like a faucet. It turns off and on.
And so as a child, my perception of jazz was it was just something that you made up as you go along. This is before I knew the word improvisation. And for me, the ultimate example of this is when Ella Fitzgerald does her scat singing. She certainly makes it up as she goes along. And when I was a child, I also thought that girl from Ipanema was jazzy. Okay, yes, I know it's bossa nova because of the rhythm, but when you hear Stan Getz on the saxophone, the way his music weaves in and out, to me, felt like it was jazzy.
Oh, but he watches so sadly. How can he tell her he loves her? Yes, he would give his heart gladly. But each day when she walks to the sea, she looks straight ahead, not at him.
The next example of jazz many of you will not have heard before. This is from more than 40 years ago, an English band by the name of Level 42. And it's jazz, but it's jazz funk. And the vocals from the bass guitarist, I think, must have been spontaneous. And for me, they're quite a remarkable example of jazz, with how it just goes into free flow.
I don't wanna go to war. I don't wanna go to war. I said I know what I want and I don't wanna go to war. Do you follow me? I saw just standing in a bar. Looked so dark, he come so far. He said I need to love someone before they drop the atom bomb.
And I think that's so good, we need to hear another verse of the same song.
So I'm taking you out, but I'm a faking. I'm married to the beat, to the music I gave, the heart I could have given you. Still, there's something about the way that you move and the way that people stare. It's the shock of you. I want my friends to see me standing next to you.
Let's take a time machine back to 1936. And there's a cartoon which just captures what this whole video is about. There's a moment in this cartoon where there's some singing which is straight, and traditional, and I would call it one-dimensional, and then he breaks into jazz. And this is the contrast between jazz and non-jazz that we're talking about.
Drink to me only with thine eyes, and I will pledge with mine. I love to sing about the moon and the June and the spring. I love to sing about a sky of blue or a T42, anything with a swing or two. And I love you, I love to sing.
But the nature of jazz is not just confined to singing. The fluidity and making it up as you go along spills into other art forms as well. In painting, you have what I would call the linearists. You have painters who paint, and the result looks like a photograph. In the mid-19th century, you had artists like David and Ingres, and their portraits were totally perfect. But then in the mid-19th century was the invention of photography. And as it became more popular, painters did not need to document things for posterity in the same way. In the mid-20th century, you had the famous painter Andrew Wyeth. His paintings also look like photographs, but contrast that with what I would call the jazzy approach to painting. You had Seurat, who almost single-handedly invented pointillism, where his paintings were composed of thousands of individual dots. You had Van Gogh with his free-flow approach to painting. Monet with his water lilies would never be accused of being a linearist attached to exact shape and exact form. And of course you had Picasso with his cubism, and you cannot really get much further away from a photograph than this. And in the mid-20th century you had the very famous painter Jackson Pollock, and his approach to painting was very jazzy indeed. But this jazzy approach to art even spills into the world of architecture. Now you would think architecture would be exact measurements and straight lines, and well and truly it is. But if you can think outside of the box and be a jazz singer, then you can think outside of the box and be an architect. You have Gaudi from Barcelona with his buildings looking like melted wedding cakes. And in West London, you have a very famous building known as the Arc, which literally looks like an arc with its lack of right angles. And so you have this contrast between straight lines and exact preparation versus making it up as you go along. Let's turn to Angelina and see how she approaches it. Angelina is a very thorough professional, and she does a lot of preparation in everything she does. Very little is left to chance. And yet, going back to Billie Holiday's example, when we listen to Angelina, you can hear every single moment she has a choice of where she will take the word with the music and with the expression. We'll hear two examples of Summertime. The first you will know very well, and the second maybe slightly less well. But listen to the subtle differences and the subtle choices that she makes. The second one is slower, and she puts more feeling into it. But to me, this is an exquisite example of jazz, of the free flow and fluidity in music.
Curtain is high. And the living is easy. Fish are jumping, and the curtain is high.
And another example from Angelina, again with much preparation, but it highlights all of the choices musically and artistically that she can make when she does Bad Valentine, with two different styles. One is considered a jazz version and the other is not. But in terms of multiple options at every moment of the song, this is what we're talking about.
I stood you up on that and died. Gave you no reason why. Decided I cut you off without a tear in my eye. I stood you up on that and died. Gave you no reason why. Decided I cut you off without a tear in my eye.
So this approach to jazz actually spills over into real life and everyday moments. I remember 25 years ago when my kids were little and I would tell them bedtime stories. One would say, "Tell us a story about a princess." And the other would say, "Tell us a story about a tiger." And so I would, in the best tradition of jazz, I would make it up as I would go along. And many of you will know that Pontus and I do a podcast. And we have a little bit of a structure beforehand, but basically we just make it up as we go along. Here's an example.
There's also one that I find very interesting in the way she interprets a classical song. And that's the Mamas and the Papas, California Dreaming, because she does this really new take on it.
But let's have him listen to it. Strike while the iron is hot. We have a very jazzy approach to these podcasts. We sort of make it up as we go along. But the implications are even more profound and even more widespread. There are many people who are uncomfortable with uncertainty and they want everything pre-planned and they are not happy with the unpredictable surprises that life throws at you. Nina Simone had a very famous quote in this direction, and she summed it up really well. She said, "Jazz is not just music. It's a way of life. It's a way of being, a way of thinking." I agree with that. Jazz is just more than music. There's a famous expression, tongue-in-cheek, which could be said to mathematicians, "Go forth and multiply." But we will close with the very prophetic words that were said to Angelina just before she went on stage to sing Gloomy Sunday. Go out there and give them jazz.